We're live.
All right. I'm just refreshing my the meeting notes over here so I can see what we'll talk about. Okay. All right. I will also share my screen. Let's see if that works. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Sweet. Cool. Okay. So we have to hold off for now on the approving of the PRs and observers. So I want to talk about, we'll cover some of the use cases that were added. But I also figure this is a nice time to talk about kind of what's happened in the last 2 weeks on the modules front, both in userland and in Node. So if you're following along on the pull requests, there's been some activity on, well, first of all, Node 10 is released, and then Node 10.1 has also been released. And on the ESM front, on that one, there is a utility method. So util.types.is module namespace object, or I believe the API is, and that will detect if an object is a namespace object. So that's in there. There's also been some progress on the experimental named export support of built-in modules. So things like FS, path, events, those kind of built-in modules there's been work on that front. There was a couple of V8 bugs that caused the pull request to be complicated. And those bugs were resolved. So now the pull request has been updated for simplicity there. So there's been work there. On the ecosystem front, so userland, I've been experimenting with enabling AMP or application performance monitoring packages. The last 2 weeks, I've been getting those working in userland with ESM code in an interop kind of path. Last week, I was able to also get things like mocking. So that falls into use cases for performance monitors and path resolution augmentation, and also dynamic swapping out of exports. Not only enabling them, but also disabling them at runtime too, which turns out is a separate piece to get working. So that's on my neck of the woods. Let me see if anyone else has any updates via userland or Node related to modules. Let me look at the interface here. I can't see raised hands. We have one raised hand. Bradley. Not Bradley, Jordan.
Hey, so I just wanted to quickly mention that Node 10.0 introduced a new core module, FS/promises. And Node 10.1 moved it to be a promises property on the FS core module instead. The reasoning is because I had opened an issue, prior to HTTP2 being landed as a core module, basically asking, can we figure out a way for new core modules to not conflict with the overarching bare package name namespace on NPM? And my hope was that it wouldn't be too late for HTTP2, but all the folks who'd been working on it had some strong pushback against changing the plan there. So the rough consensus of the thread was, okay, after HTTP2, we won't add anything new until we've figured out some sustainable solution moving forward. And that might be a namespace that Node Core could own on NPM. It might be some string that is an impossible package name so that no one on NPM could be using it, or that it couldn't be something on the file system. The details haven't been figured out, but so that was the reason for moving FS/promises away from being a full core module. But that issue still needs to be kind of decided. and it's going to keep coming up because especially with promise-based interfaces for all the current callback things that people are going to want. So I don't have it on hand because I'm on mobile, but I will try and add into the Google Doc a link to that relevant issue. So anyone who has ideas about how to make all new core modules not conflict with all of NPM, that would be really helpful and is slightly relevant to this group. So,
That's, oh, sorry.
I was just going to add to that discussion in that there was some discussion that, maybe it's what we do for CGS is tied to what we do for the ES6 modules. So if this group thinks that there is or is not a linkage, and if there is, like what the suggestions would be, actually chiming in would definitely be useful to help that move forward. Because I think at this point it's kind of like, well, a little bit of the sense I got is we kind of need to know what's happening and would make sense on the module side to push it forward on the other side.
Right, and I assume we'd all agree that that the immediate linkage is that anything that's done with a CJS module needs to be future compatible with, the general sense that we have of how it will work with ES modules in terms of ergonomics and how the API looks and stuff.
What I would say is if you find those issues on Node, you can always CC the modules group, and then that'll get a broader attention to the issue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. Also, this could also bleed over into TC39 as well. They're trying, someone's phone's going off. They're trying to resolve things like array flatten and that naming issue, and namespaces and naming tends to come up a lot. So having a way to do that cleanly would be great. Okay, let's look at there another raised hand. Sorry, Bradley.
Just don't expect built-in modules to come through TC39 anytime soon. So maybe let's not lean on that.
Oh, sure. I was just saying there's another thread that it could kind of link to there. Cool. Okay, so last week we started finishing some of the use cases and moving and fleshing out kind of the features from them and bucketizing them. I believe we have a few more use cases that have been added that we can bucket. And then from there, I will let some folks talk through some of those features. I think, so now that we have features and they are bucketed, it may be good to go back through them and actually start, now that there is a bucket, start fleshing out what features would actually materialize from those buckets. I looked through the buckets to see which use cases fell into which features fell into the most use cases. And it appears to be things like specifier resolution and specifier customization is a one that affects a large number of use cases. But let's look at the use case document. So from there, if you're following the agenda, the meeting issue, it should be issue number 55, and inside issue number 55, there's a link to the use case document. And right now I'm not looking at Zoom, so I can't see hands raised, so please, I'll pop back over there in a second. If someone else wants to also lead the discussion on the use cases, that's cool too. I don't have to do everything there. I believe we left off last week right before the TypeScript use cases, because I remember they were saying that they forgot to add their use cases. And then we were looking at some of Jeffrey's. So I think we have either the tail end, so number 40 and below. Let's see, do we have any volunteers? Nope, okay, so that's gonna be me, all right. We still don't have quorum, by the way. So I'm looking at the panelists, we have 13 attendees so far. Okay, let's see. Jeffrey, are you on the call?
Hey, I'm here.
You don't have access to your the document, do you? Because
I can see your screen.
Oh, sweet, cool. All right, so this may be a little bit of review, but we'll go through number 40 and 41. So Chris has been working on a Node app for several years. It uses Babel for transpilation. So basically, you're saying that
Sorry, you want me to like kind of summarize this or what it comes from? I was just trying to imagine like the most common like use case from what I'm familiar with, like what I think most users would be in the situation. Like I've seen a lot of people, they use Babel and to basically like, well, I want to use all the new ES6 stuff, like starting back in 2015. And part of that has been import and export because that was released way back as part of ES 2015. And so they've littered their code with it. Sorry, maybe that's a little bit of a derogatory term, but they've used it throughout their code. And I think it's pretty like I would think that most people kind of choose one or the other. Like it's not that common that they would use import and export statements as well as require statements in their code. There's probably just like either one style or the other throughout their code base, at least for their app, not including like any dependencies like node modules that they're importing. So for them, like I think for the average user, they don't think of this feature as like supporting like that Node added support for modules. I think the average user just sees it as Node added support for import and export statements, like the syntax. So like from an average user's perspective, it's like, well, I already have import statements in my code and it already has like, import underscore from underscore and stuff like that, or underscore from Lodash or whatever. And once Node adds support for it, I just can turn off that Babel transform or turn off Babel entirely, and it should just work. Like that's what I was trying to get across. That like for users, the feature is the syntax, and the syntax working the way it is for them now through Babel, like directly in Node.
So you envision the migration path to be something where you just disable the module transform, and then their code would work, assuming there was rules in place and all of that.
Right. Like I obviously, if they're using both import and require in the same file and stuff like that, that's, like it's not going to be like every single person for every single variant. It's going to just work when they disable Babel. But like, I think for common use cases or for like the most plain types of apps or like that we see a lot,
so we have a feature that says transparent migration, and that's what number 39 was under. I feel like this is another migration case, and being able to drop a transform sounds like transparent to me. You drop a transform, your stuff works.
As well as if there's I don't know if this is the same feature or it's a different one, of like being able to use import for a common JS module and not have to think about it, because that's what users are doing now and have been for 3 years. Or maybe import, transparent interoperability. Sounds like it. Or one of the interop ones.
That does. All right. Sweet. Cool. Let's go back. Number 41. Okay, so 41 was just a real world use case.
Well, it's not a real world use case of number 40. It's just a separate real world use case. So like you can, so for example, you can put a require statement inside an if,
Correct.
which you can't do with an import statement. And that's just one example of like, just looking at the plain syntax definition in like the MDN article for import, for example, of like, this is something you can do with CommonJS that kind of by definition you can't do in ES 2015. I mean, maybe that'll change in the future.
I assume you mean synchronous because there is dynamic import.
Last I checked, that wasn't stage 4. So it's like,
In
Okay.
stage 3, that's roughly as certain. I mean,
Yeah. There's
but
also
yeah, we definitely still need synchronous conditional imports, I think, but like that's not. I don't think that's something that we can really in this group do anything about.
Well, leaving that aside, that was just it's an example of like, something you can do in CommonJS that you can't do in ES modules, and maybe this might be this specific example might be something that you become able to do, but the point being, like, there will be some things, I'm assuming, that like aren't possible in the new ESM world.
Mhm.
And so some packages will need to keep using CommonJS for that reason, that either they have to refactor and drop functionality, or they're stuck on CommonJS for whatever reason. Like if they have like in CoffeeScript, for example, we have a basically the equivalent of a module loader hook for specifically like require.extensions. So that's obviously very specific to CommonJS. So unless we want to drop support for, integrating with the CommonJS module loader, we need to keep that and keep the stuff related to CommonJS. So that's the thing. It's like assuming that I'm using something in CommonJS, I'm not going to refactor it out, or I can't refactor it out. I want my module to still be importable into an ESM project. If that makes sense.
So what I've done is for number 41, I filed that under a new feature, which is synchronous ESM loading, use case 41. I figure because there will be more use cases that come up for that.
That's the specific about like in the if statement type of thing? Yeah. Okay. And then is the other thing about like packages that'll be in CommonJS forever, letting them be used, imported into an ESM module? I'm assuming that's another interop one.
Transparent interoperability, maybe. I think that I've never. To me, I had always assumed CommonJS will be supported. Like if the file is recognized as CommonJS, it will be treated as CommonJS. But I will add that to interoperability.
I mean, I guess I didn't really put this in the Google Doc, but I guess maybe part of it is like I, as the package maintainer, I don't want to have to do anything for my package to be used in ESM. Like, I don't want to have to like create a Babel transform to create a separate output so that someone can do an import statement for my package. Because then it's like, the million packages that are out there on NPM, it's like, you got to just hope that they're all being maintained and all those people are going to update their things and so on. So I'd rather not put that burden on all the people who've ever published a package.
We have 2 hands raised. I don't know who raised their hand first.
Jeremiah's first.
All right, there we go.
So yeah, you were a little bit ambiguous about packages that could not be done in ES modules. So Bradley has in the past found some of these. Usually it's doing wild things with Node.js's cache mechanism, but they do exist, and we do have at least somewhere a record of some of them.
Okay.
That's all.
Cool. Bradley?
Yeah, so I want to object to using the word synchronous in the use case, because this was conditional, not about synchronous. So
would you say that something in an if statement would be synchronous?
Not if there's top level await.
Okay.
Well, they are different because like right now, if I do like, if process.env blah, 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 require such and such, that require statement is synchronous. I'm not like, it's not returning a promise. So that code would have to be refactored beyond just converting the require to an import. There would have to be like some significant refactoring in that app to make that handle, a promise being returned or a promise being resolved.
Well, that's also different from what I was reading for the use case. The use case was about like doing things conditionally. So if we want to add something about how we cannot have that be async, that seems fine. but it's not phrased in a way that's synchronous right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
I will.
that use case was meant to just be was using that as an example, just to be talking about a package that's going to need to do CommonJS stuff. But
Okay.
maybe we should split out some of these other things as separate use cases to give them their own.
I will conditional
imports.
Yes, and that may be covered by things like dynamic import, but it's still a feature. Number 41. Okay.
So I still want to expand 41 if we're going to keep the word synchronous, which was my whole.
Okay.
How about we just I can create a new use case or two to split those out into their own things rather than this one.
I have a whole bunch of use cases
separate.
that require synchronous, so we can do that separately. And I can fill that out.
All right.
Yeah, or if they're covered elsewhere, then I won't need to bother.
Okay. So what I will do is I will change that document from saying 41 to saying TBD, because it's coming. All right. Okay. The next, no more hands are raised. So we'll go to the next item, which is Daniel. Are you here? TypeScript. Wes, are you here? Nope. Okay, we will, whoops, let's see.
People have said some stuff in the chat, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Seems like Wes is here. Daniel's at build, apparently.
Oh, okay. Wes, would you like to cover them?
He just said in the chat he doesn't have audio right now.
Oh, he doesn't have audio? Okay. This interface is interesting. I think if I go to the chat, I lose the other one. Oh, there I go. I got it. Sweet. Cool. We'll circle back. Okay. Miles is out. Let's see. Let's see if S Motol is here. S Motol. I don't recognize the alias, but it could be anyone. So, all right. I don't see anyone raising their hand. So we'll go to Jeffrey again, number 47.
I guess this is the advantage of showing up, huh?
Yeah.
So, yeah, another real world use case of importing a JSON file. Obviously you could do this via, I guess, fs.readFileSync, but it's pretty common for apps to do require something.json. In particular, something I've seen in several different apps is require package.json to dynamically pull, for example, the version of your package without having to copy paste that or do a file open or any of that kind of stuff. So this is synchronous, I guess. Synchronous import of JSON file, and then be able to access it as a object.
Okay. JSON could be seen as interop, but it could also be seen as not interop. So I'm going to put an item for one and then the other, and we can shake out, because depending on how interop is handled, JSON can be handled differently if it is a thing. 47.
I think people think of JSON as almost like a special case because it is like executable JavaScript. So it's sort of like if you can import a .js file synchronously, you should also be able to import a .json file synchronously.
Does anyone
you know what I mean?
A feature that covers things like other than non-JS for loading?
There was WASM.
I'm wondering if
WASM and HTML imports are somewhere in there as future things we'll need to handle.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what the group would be. Let's see.
Isn't there also native modules like
.node?
or yeah, C# or C stuff that's been compiled, etc.
Yeah, that's the .node files.
Yep. Okay. Well, I will do some cleanup on this. My homework is to find those and associate them with them so I can consolidate this item. Loading non.js. Importing, sorry. We want to use the ES6 module terminology. Importing non.js files, for example, JSON, WASM, Node,
HTML,
etc. Cool. And that item is 47, I believe. And it is 47. Cool. Use case number 47. All right.
Should we put 47 also under synchronous too? Or is that a problem? Is there a problem with that? Probably.
I'm unsure what's synchronous about it.
I mean, I was kind of on the fence about that too, just because the thing was loading JSON, but and the example was a common JS example, but I didn't see anything about synchronous there, so I figured that could just be a bike shed for another.
Well, what's synchronous is that it's like, like in the example there, version equals require package.json. The very next line, you could use that version variable. You don't need to wait for a promise to resolve. That's how people are using it now, because it's like generally, I mean, I'm assuming even in the ESM world, when you're importing a relative file, like your main.js and you're importing, foo.js, that's a synchronous import, right? It's not like every import statement becomes a promise to await.
It's not synchronous
behind the scenes,
but it's done ahead of time. So
from the perspective of the developer, I don't need to write like await or .then or any of that stuff, right?
To use variables, no.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean by synchronous. Like, I don't care if under the hood it's synchronous or asynchronous. I mean, like, from a developer, I don't have to write a promise or an await or any of that stuff the same way that I don't have to right now with a require statement.
Jeffrey, I'm going to have you do a follow-up just to clarify the use case, because it feels like that there's a lot of room for interpretation on it. And what that means is that if that ends up in the process of fleshing out that use case, if it becomes a synchronous one, then we can add it to the synchronous bit. But at the moment, source being able to read like a JSON or HTML or native is a scenario or a feature. And I think that as it's written at the moment, it feels a little wiggly to be just synchronous, but feel free to modify the use case, and then totally we'll be able to add it to the synchronous use case for sure.
Or I could just add a second one, sure.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. All right, so we have a bunch of features with numbers. I would like if we could talk about like next steps. Every week we can look at the use cases that are entered and then bucketize them into possible features. But we need to talk about like what are we going to do now that we have a list of features and scenarios that fit into those features. My take would be, just throwing it out there, would be to start seeing if they're materializing the features a little bit more, seeing if we can start saying things like prioritizing the features and start thinking about them in terms of implementation, because that's the next step. We've approached this so far with a yes and mindset, and I think that now we're going to have to start talking about core design decisions. So things like synchronous, being able to do something synchronous can affect common JS interop and has a ripple in terms of implementation details beyond that, and things like APIs that shake out into the VM module and other things. So I know that we're going to have to work that out. And if anyone has any ideas on how to go forward with that in a way that we can handle with discussion and maybe something that we can tackle in between the 2 weeks between the meets, we can come to a meeting prepared to be able to move some of these things forward. That would be great. Let's see, there is a hand raise, and it's Wes.
I think he needs to be promoted.
Oh, I don't have that power. Michael?
Yep, let me do it. I think you should be able to now, but maybe no, maybe it's just the host. Anyway, promoted.
Okay. Wes? Oh, was that just all you needed to do was be promoted, or do you have a comment?
He was going to discuss Daniel's.
Oh, okay, sweet. Well, we can do that too. Is he popping in? This is true. Okay. Wes?
Ha! Being muted doesn't.
There you go.
There you are.
So Daniel's use case was number 42.
Yes.
Which was Rachel is a TypeScript user who's importing some JavaScript code that uses CommonJS. She uses declaration files that were written on definitely typed, but were authored as ES module top-level exports like so, export stuff. And when she imports from TypeScript, she gets code completion on the namespace import for foo and bar, meaning you do import star as whatever from some package and you get completions. And she expects her code to run and compile on either the CommonJS or ESNext module targets and expects them to run correctly. So the core of this is essentially that people have been authoring type definition files and TypeScript code effectively with the expectation that you can swap out the underlying module system from ESN to CJS and the semantics don't change much. I think it's just another note in the transparent interop category.
Okay. I'm not super familiar with the definition files or how that relates to ESM, but being able to swap out the module format below and it worked, that does sound like transparent interop.
Yeah, so definition files are just an extra, I guess, wrench in this compatibility problem that we at TypeScript have. They're extra metadata describing the type information for hundreds of thousands of node modules that the community has been maintaining over the last few years. And typically they're authored in the style of ESM, even if the package itself isn't actually written in ESM today, because it couldn't be. But the syntax was available and everyone assumed that they would work in the same way, and so that's how they've been written. The thing about a non-transparent interop scheme would require, at least from us, like a complete fracturing of our type ecosystem. It would be bad. Yeah.
Can you flesh out the use case with, well, I guess that might go under features whenever we do. It would be nice to understand the problem case or the expected case to work. Like, for example, if you have this ESM kind of syntax for your type definition file, how does that change with the module format being ESM or CommonJS underneath it?
So the core of it is that, like, saying that you export foo is the same as exports.foo in CommonJS, and so on. Like that's pretty much it. Like it's that that ESM is effectively just like a mask over CommonJS that lets you not assign to the entire module object. Like that's the only thing that's different.
So yes, this would be an interop thing.
Yeah.
So however we tackle interop, that would be a use case to consider.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's the only use case there then, number 42.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now we have all these features. Do we have quorum now? We have 14. But
I added the last feature you asked me to write.
Okay.
Or the use case.
Cool.
I think Bradley's had his hand up for a while.
Yes, Bradley.
I had a question because I don't know TypeScript as well. Is there any problem with if you have to recompile it if there are minor differences?
So recompiling specifically wouldn't be the problem. The thing is, when I'm talking about type definition files, I'm talking about extra files of metadata that are distributed sometimes alongside a CommonJS package that just provides strong types for the package. Those aren't compiled per se, they're just read in. What we would need to do in a world where ESM is not transparent with CJS is introduce another marker for like Node ESM that only new type definition files can ever be compatible with, because obviously old type definition files were written with the intent that the interop would be transparent, and it's not.
So I still don't understand. Maybe this can go offline somewhere, but what prevents the compiler from using two forms of interop?
So the compiler itself obviously can be flexible and do anything it needs to. It's about making the community's existing code continue to work as their packages change out from underneath them. So in a way, like if Node does have like a breaking upgrade path where ESM isn't substitutable for CommonJS and everything has to be different, then by extension, TypeScript has to do the same thing. We just have twice as many files we need to look at because we need to look at ESM and we need to look at definition files, and the definition files need a marker to indicate they're for Node ESM and not interop Babel CJS transpiled ESM. Because like in effect, unless Node does almost exactly what Babel was doing prior to Node deciding to implement like ES modules, we are going to have to, in order to support everyone who's been writing ES modules for the last few years, we're going to have to support multiple ESM formats. So it's one of those, you might be able to get closer to the browser, but you will get farther away from your past.
Okay, I'm gonna follow up offline somehow.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you could. Maybe you should even create a module working group issue specifically for TypeScript interop, just so we can better understand that concern, because that would help feed in to the interop strategy. Rebecca?
Yes, yeah, it would be really helpful if you could describe how the type definition files would have to differ between for different modes, because I think that's what we're not getting. And there are other parts where it's like part of the reason the modules working group exists now is to draw these use cases into the discussion about what Node's final implementation will look like. So like this isn't one that we had considered before, so this is really good.
Yeah.
Okay, after the meeting, I'll be sure to make that and try to include a decent description.
Cool. All right. Let's see. I still don't think we have quorum, which is unfortunate. So we should discuss what we want to do now that we have all these scenarios and features. One of the things I can do is start to open issues for us to look at a specific feature more closely and then start to flesh that out. Does anyone have any opinions on which one of those that might be? We have several. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, the one with a lot of the use cases looks like specifier resolution or customization. But does anyone else want to volunteer to pick up one and start digging into it? Or have a feature that is close to the one? Let's see. Okay. I don't see anyone raising their hands. I'm from the ecosystem. Hey, Rebecca, yay. Oh, I think you're muted.
Wasn't actually volunteering for that, but a quick procedural note. On the procedural decisions that we had here, I would note that in the issue, a number of people said, this is my vote. I can't attend, but this is my vote. So we may have quorum if we count them.
Okay. That's going to be neat. Yeah. I could have some help with math. That would be good. And lining up who's attending versus who's voted, because that would be nice if we could clear out some of those.
We'll also need to differentiate observers and non, I think, to establish quorum.
Correct. So what I will do, just to kind of make this easier, is we can look at the actual issue, and then if everyone is approving, so for example, the meeting notes from 425, does anyone object to merging in the meeting notes? Okay, so no. All right, so of the members in attendance, we have, I believe, 12, but I need to count that again. So one. Michael, are you a member?
Yes.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. I believe that's 9 or 10. Can I get a double check on that? And then the actual issue we have, we have Jordan that's overlapping. We have Wes that's overlapping. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm one of them, 8. Okay. So if you have not approved, this might also be easier. If you have not approved the pull request, and you're in attendance and you agree that it should be merged, can you go ahead and approve the pull request? That way, after the meeting, we can just look at the number of approvals and do it that way too, which actually might be easier than cross-referencing who's in attendance and who hasn't already voted. I believe we just need a couple more. 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. We need 6 more. So please approve the pull request if you wish to do so for the yay vote. Cool. Let's look at the governance pull request as well, number 72. The gist of this pull request was to allow merging for error corrections, editorial changes, without having to have a vote in the meeting, the actual meeting. I believe there is specifics about this here. It says pull requests not included under the special exemptions below must reach consensus. Here are the special exceptions for that. And that is things like error fixes, meeting notes, and updates to team lists via the automated tooling. So things that can be automated or tweaking existing things. So if you are okay with that change, please go and upvote it or approve it. So then after the meeting, we can close that out. Cool. I think that one might actually be good to go. Let's see. We have 1, 2, 3. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's more than enough. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and merge this since it seems to have more than enough approval and no rejections. Okay. Sweet. Merged. Okay. I think that might make some of these other things easier too. Okay. The other one is adding Tara as an observer. Let me get the name right. Yes, Tara as an observer. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll go ahead and say yes to that too. It's 11, so we just need a few more. So go ahead and if you approve that, go ahead and update the issue there too, and then we'll take care of that too. Okay.
I think when they added me, it was some other process where it was like adding to the list of users or something, because then the list of names on the README was auto-generated. Just FYI, if you want to just make sure we're
Miles
doing
will
that
have
right.
to set up the permissions and the teams and stuff, I think.
Yeah.
For that.
But I think that looks like there's no objections here, and I believe within one of our votes we'll have quorum on that. So I suspect in probably the next 5 minutes, there we go, we'll be able to have that. Okay, I believe we do. So I'll go ahead and merge that one too. Okay. Cool. All right. So we were able to take care of things on the agenda today. Hey, nice. I think that leaves just one of them open at the moment until we vote on that, which I think is just the meeting notes. And we've already taken care of that with the ability to merge the meeting notes, so we could probably just merge that too. If anyone wants to volunteer to that, or I'll have Miles follow up and do that since he's been closing out the meeting notes before. I don't want to step on toes in terms of process. Cool. Well, we have 6 minutes left. I would encourage y'all to start looking at the features that we have and start thinking about those. Up, Bradley, you have your hands up.
It got skipped over, but earlier Guy Bedford wanted to maybe mention something that Gus Kaplan was thinking about proposing. There was some chatter about dynamic import and mention about how you can't dynamically import something that has a then export because of its called. So, Guy, do you want to talk about that, or should I?
Sorry, were you asking me there, Bradley?
Yes, because you're the one who put it in the chat, but you didn't raise your hand or anything. So,
yeah, sure. So I think it's really interesting because the use cases around this came up as we were starting to integrate, well, as Gus was starting to integrate dynamic import into the current modules implementation. And if your module happens to have a then you can't actually provide it back to Node. And this seems okay within modules themselves, but when you're writing an API that you're exposing to Node developers who want to be able to give back arbitrary modules through this API to provide dynamic import through the VM module, that API breaks down as soon as you give a module object that has a then on it. So you don't have the guarantee that the dynamic import is always going to return a module object. So Gus's proposal was to basically add a symbol to modules that allows them to have a then function, and that would then not get treated as thenables in promise chains. And he's proposed this to TC39. But he does need a champion to be able to move forward with that. So it would be interesting to hear what people think about.
He hasn't proposed it yet.
Well, he's proposed it on ES Discuss, and he's looking for a champion to take it to TC39. So, yeah.
Okay. We have Microsoft champion that would dig that too. I think that's good to for awareness. I knew that imports were thenable. I was not aware it was causing problems with Node. If y'all could create an issue if there isn't one, or at least maybe in the Node community too, if there is one, for the discussion, so other people can follow along and pitch in where needed, that would be helpful.
And cool. As a TC39 member, what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, from me. I think it was an interesting case, the then trap. I have no issue with adding a symbol. We add symbols for all kinds of things, well-known symbols. So to me, this sounds like another case for a legit case for it. I'm sure someone might have stronger opinions on it. But for me, I see it as a good thing. I'll touch base with some of the people that go to these things. The individual that was here right behind me is Kevin Smith. He'll be Microsoft's TC39 rep moving forward for the Edge platform team. So we'll, or the web platform team. So he'll be getting more involved in these discussions. He was just sitting in as like his second day to see this meeting. Cool. We have hands. I'm Rob. From the record.
Hi. So when this issue before has come up, the
one second. Whoever's typing.
Michael.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. If you could just mute,
Yep.
just because it's cool.
Doing that.
when this has come up before about the auto assimilation of then properties and the opportunity to introduce a symbol to prevent this, generally there's been strong views, I think, from Dominic there, that this is nothing to do with modules or dynamic import, and that this is just something that should be universally solved as a language for any promise returning API.
Okay. I think if this is proposed to the TC39 and y'all could CC the modules group, that would be another way for us to kind of passively observe or jump in with more on that discussion. Yeah. Gregory?
You mean Jeffrey?
Sorry.
I was just going to ask what you had started to talk about features. I was just going to ask what the next step in our process is, since we're apparently out of time today.
Yes, we are out of time. We, as a group, we decided to look at use cases and then from there flesh out features. I think that the next step is to dig more into those features and start materializing them as like, okay, so we have interop. What does that interop mean? Transparent interop. We should start listing things out for that. Or if it's path resolution, customization, what does that mean? Besides just the generic category, we should start saying like, well, what to enable the scenario, what's going to happen from there. So we should start fleshing out the features so we can start discussing things that will lead to things like implementation.
Okay, so is that when you say flesh it out, you mean like in discussion in the next meeting, or do GitHub or something?
I would say in between the next meeting. We only have an hour every 2 weeks, so if we could engage in the issue thread for things like that, that would be great. I would say that we have quite a few areas of features now broken out. Let's see on the exact list here. We have 1, 2, 3.
So should we be creating like one issue per feature or something? Or
I say that if you are passionate about, we have 17 or 18 or so features and then use cases that fall into all of them. That would be my next thing would be, the next course would be, fleshing those out. So I would say pick one that you happen to be passionate about or you want to contribute to, create an issue for that. If there's already an issue created, then you can engage with that issue. So you don't have to create multiple noise. We will tag those as discussion so that we can have a discussion there. I would say this is where we can also look at various approaches and get into that a little bit more because that's the next step.
Cool.
All right.
And I assume we're gonna continue the yes and mindset of like assume until proven otherwise that potentially every feature gets implemented, and maybe later way down the line when we're actually talking implementation details is when we start knocking things out.
I would say try to be open-minded and yes and it would be also nice though that since we are fleshing things out, you will come into a discussion that says like under the current approach or as things are now, X, Y, or Z is doable or not doable. I would also like to encourage folks to say like if it is this encouraging mindset is what would need to be adjusted or tweaked, or what would the path look like to enable something like X, Y, or Z. So not just what works under the current work in progress, but what would need to be changed or tweaked to enable a feature for a given use case would also be helpful, just so people kind of know like where the roadblocks are going to be, where the challenges are going to be, where they'll need to petition the TC39 or other bodies for assistance.
And I'd just like to second that. We shouldn't limit ourselves to just tweaking implementation. We're still behind an experimental flag. We can scrap a very large chunk if that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So not just tweaks. Like
sure. Yeah, I was qualifying my words just to be nice, but I was, yeah. So just keep that in mind. Try to enable, empower. Think about the use case and the feature and what we can do to solve that. There's software is, you can solve problems in a myriad of different ways. So we should start thinking about that. If it's not the one way, well, what about another way? Well, what about another way? Well, what about this way? And kind of approach it that way. But I would encourage to have more activity in the issues and threads. So the next meeting we have, we can dig into some of these and start fleshing them out. Cool. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all for attending. I will follow up on that one issue where we didn't close it out yet. And I believe now that we have of the approval process to do so, those meeting notes should be closed up. In between then, now and next meeting, if you find something like the then issue with imports, or you run into a language construct, feel free to open an issue or CC the working group. I've seen it done a couple times, and that's great. I get a heads up on things I would have had no idea about. So cool. Thank you all.